someplace over the Pacific Northwest, this is a Space Dog radio show. I'm the Space Dog. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for joining us. You can catch us on Space Dog Radio 24/7 around the world and throughout the universe on spacedogradio.com. You can also find us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter at Space Dog Radio. We've got another special guest here, Mark Taylor-Canfield, the independent journalist who joins us many times with news run with the radar. He's been on the Huffington Post, Daily Kos, and has been on various progressive radio shows. Mark, it's an amazing evening tonight in the United States, thinking about what we may do if the United States defaults. And thank you for joining Space Dog Radio.
Well, the good news is that just a few minutes ago, this is sort of a breaking story, the U.S. Congress voted to call a truce. So at this point, the crisis is over, temporarily. So it's only a temporary truce, and it just sets a time frame of early next winter for the next likely clash between the Obama administration and the Republicans over spending. And lawmakers didn't get anything on the Republican side demanding an eradication or a scale back of the Obamacare program, which is what they call the Affordable Health Care Act. So, in a sense, it is a loss for the Republicans, but they had no choice because literally mainstream news was reporting that if, including NBC News, I tweeted about this last night, that, if the United States had not voted to extend the debt limit, basically it could lead to a default on a lot of loans, and our country could be in serious economic trouble, if nothing else for the reason that U.S. Treasury bonds are really one of the only safe investments these days. And if there's a lack of confidence in those Treasury bonds, it could really hurt the United States' reputation around the world in financial markets. So
absolutely,
they avoided a crazy crash, but that happened around 4:40 p.m. today, which is Wednesday, October the 6th.
Right. So Mark, I'm watching CSBN 2, and the Senate has passed the bill 81 yeas to 18 nays, and now goes to the House with 3 hours to go before all hell breaks loose. What's the overriding consensus that you think from the House, that the House will actually pass this bill, raise the debt limit, open up the government, and all this will be saved in the last grasp of air?
Yeah, the Senate vote was first, which permitted the Treasury to borrow through February 7th, or even maybe a month longer, and to fund the government through January 15th. So that includes, according to the Seattle PI, more than 2 million federal workers, those who were still on the job and those who've been furloughed. So they'll be paid under this agreement. But according to most news reports, across Washington, D.C., members of the House are just marking their time until it's their turn to vote. And the word is that they are going to go ahead and pass the compromise. So there will be some Tea Party candidates who will be very upset about this result. But they, I guess from a political analyst point of view, you could say that they sort of overextended themselves. In other words, they played for keeps, and sometimes when you do that, you lose, So they played all of their cards at once on this one issue, and it didn't work. It just, the American people and the international financial community is not going to allow the United States to default on these obligations. So we got to fund the government. We got to keep the country going. Even the most conservative right-winger realizes that we have to pay the military and keep, our borders safe, government services, etc. Otherwise, we're looking at chaos.
And there's very few times that I will agree with this individual, but I haven't heard McCain admit defeat about this issue. And that was amazing, because the moderates in the Republican Party have been so stifled throughout this entire situation. And it's just blew my mind that a few Republicans could actually do the damage that they have done with the shutdown, and also actually possibly to the world, just by saying, no, we're not going to pay our bills.
Well, maybe one of the points we should focus on is the fact that it's really damaged the Republican Party. And they know that. The mainstream, more moderate Republicans realize that. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce realizes that now. Strangely enough, I got into an argument with Brad Friedman on Twitter about that issue. But the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is saying that they are not going to back Cruz, type of candidates next time. They really don't want the Tea Party to be in control of the Republican Party. And I think you and I maybe even mentioned it in the last report about, it's just pointing to the fact that actually the Democrats have become more of a corporate party. I mean, they really are trying to protect the country's economy and jobs, where the Republicans are sort of going for broke on this.
Mark, what I hear a lot of the pundits say from the liberal side and the Democratic side is they just cannot believe how in lockstep the Democrats have been in this issue, and how straight on they've been fighting it unlike they've ever fought anything before, and within reason. These negotiations have been going on for months now, and finally these guys they try to pull the rug out from the entire government, and like you said, it didn't work. So it's an amazing. I think it's an amazing statement about the Democratic Party. It's an amazing statement about the Republican Party being in a circular firing squad, as they've been for months now, and they're going to be hurting come 2014. I can guarantee it.
The Republicans used to be the ones that all marched in how did you put it, in lockstep, and they also got their talking point memos every morning, so you would hear every Republican repeating the same exact phrase. It became a joke. Right. But since the bailouts of the major corporations, Lehman Brothers, and the banking system in Wall Street, there's been a backlash on the progressive and on the conservative side, and the Tea Party represented the conservative backlash. In fact, there were a lot of agreements amongst the Occupy Wall Street movement and the Tea Party organizers, but their attitude about what the solution to the problem was very, very different. Because surprisingly, the Occupy movement took a more moderate point of view on that, and said either they didn't want to get involved with politics at all because it was all corrupt, or that they wanted to continue government services. They wanted to continue low-cost loans for people so they could buy houses. They wanted to continue feeding people and clothing people and making sure that people were taken care of after the Sandy storms and things. Whereas on the Tea Party side, they went for the let's shut down the government thing, which is sort of a twist on the whole, you got to watch the leftists or whatever because they're revolutionaries. Actually, in this case, there's not a great difference in attitude about the way government should or shouldn't work between what may be considered left-wing anarchists and, right-wing Tea Party members. They just really didn't want to see the government continue as a big spending, big federal government, which in some ways goes all the way back to the Federalist argument back with John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. But in this case, the Democrats were actually the ones that were organized, and in the past that hasn't been true.
On to news under the radar. What do you have for us as far as important news under the radar, Mark?
There are other stories that are going on that have been sort of overshadowed. There's a major labor contract dispute that's been going on between 30,000 grocery workers in the Northwest, mostly represented by the UFCW, the United Food Workers Union. And so that's a major issue. And as far as I know, there has been no major breakthrough in those negotiations. And some of the corporations on the management side, QFC, Safeway, and Albertsons, had been accused of actually advertising for replacement workers. So that caused a real sense of tension. That, and of course, in union lingo, that those people would be considered scabs. So it's a bad thing to do. And they've already voted, for a potential strike. So that's something that people should look for. Another couple of stories that have been really interesting lately out of Seattle is that it was uncovered by, I believe, the Seattle Times. Yeah, the Seattle Times was saying that the Seattle Police Department has a license plate recognition system that they have monitored 1.6 million license plates in the last 3 months in Seattle, and they're saying that that's because they're looking for stolen cars and what they call chronic parking ticket offenders, or some very large number of people within that 1.6 million have been actually surveilled by Seattle Police Department license plate recognition systems. So there's another question about, surveillance of the public. We already know that the traffic lights, the traffic lights in Seattle at major intersections have cameras where the city uses to fine people for running stoplights and things like that. So what came out like a month ago is that they are taking photos of pedestrians who go through those intersections. So it's not just the cars that are running red lights that are being photographed. And so the question is what are they doing with those photographs? And so there's always this question, are they sharing them with other agencies? What are they doing with that stuff?
For those folks that are not tracking this from other parts in the world, there's a mayor's race going on in Seattle right now, and the mayor is depicted as being very police-friendly, whether they're violent or overly observant or whichever. So this can't bode well for his re-election, don't you think?
Well, yeah, people don't probably realize that the United States Department of Justice investigated or reviewed the Seattle Police Department for 18 months and found that they had a practice and policy of use of excessive force. There was also major complaints from civil rights groups about racial profiling, but for some reason the federal authorities decided not to follow up on that issue. But yes, Mayor Mike McGinn has sided with Police Chief Diaz when people were calling for his resignation, and he's seen by a lot of people who supported him during the last election as not very strong on the reform of public safety issues. I also wanted to throw another quick story in here, is that there was a research project done out of Seattle, and actually at KPLU, they posted the story and also did some audio report on it, but these researchers at the University of Washington, including, I believe, Amy Hagopian, have decided that there's been potentially 500,000 casualties in Iraq. And that is, and when they say casualties, they're also referring to side issues of health problems and things that have been caused by the U.S. invasion. So that's a story that's not getting much play either. The headline at KPLU's website is that Seattle researchers say death toll for Iraq will likely near 500,000.
Okay.
So what it was a research project, and they're saying that 60% of this number died from violence, but 40% died from what they call secondary causes. And it was the University of Washington's Department of Global Health, which said that, they're looking at about 500,000. And that's also, that is Amy Hagopian. She, if people don't remember this, but she was a candidate for Seattle school board, Seattle District School Board at one point, and her son is also a major activist in town, but she's a part of this department at the UW, the Department of Global Health, who's doing the study. So what they're saying is that medical and public health systems get degraded during wartime and can be too overwhelmed with the victims of violence from the war actions. So people die of things like diabetes, heart disease, and other treatable health issues. They also estimated that those secondary deaths were due to the expected death rate before the war and comparing it to the actual rate now, so they can see that people with these kinds of conditions were not dying at that rate before the U.S. invasion.
Mark, you had a story out of India you want to talk about. Is that correct?
Yeah, actually, there has been an anti-corruption movement in India for years now that's been headed by a man who, because he has a Sanskrit, a Hindi nickname, Anna, his name is Anna Hazare, but he has been leading these hunger strikes and demanding accountability on the part of government and corporations in India because, as we know, a lot of the economies of the world have shifted to China and India. A lot of large investors are going to those places for cheap labor and other reasons. So India has a huge growing middle and upper class, but there's still a huge divide, much larger actually than in the United States, more like in China, where you have people living sort of medieval lifestyles at the same time.
What's the current situation now with these strikes that are going on?
Well, he conducted a hunger strike last year that involved tens of thousands of people, actually, where the government was forced to allow investigations as part of their anti-corruption legislation of the very top levels of government. They were about ready to pass legislation which wasn't going to reach to the highest levels. And so he went on a hunger strike, and this is maybe the third time that I know of that he's done this. And, within weeks, the government has capitulated each time because he has hundreds of thousands of followers in the country who also tend to go on strike with him and hold mass demonstrations. So it's a civil disobedience movement, and he claims that he is taking his cue from Mahatma Gandhi, that he is a tried and true, dedicated Gandhian nonviolent activist. But definitely, much like Dr. Vandana Shiva, who I think we talked about last week, he is not against civil disobedience. He's, for general strikes and hunger fasts and whatever it takes to bring attention to their cause. So he's following in Gandhi's footsteps in that way and has been very successful at this point. Although, like I said, the Western media, for some reason, does not cover these issues at all. It's a major mass movement in India for an anti-corruption, pro-democracy movement, headed mostly by Anna Hazare because he's so revered in the culture as a very authentic activist.
Great topics. Mark Taylor-Canfield, the fiercely independent journalist, activist, musician. Find him at facebook.com/mtaylor-canfield. And on Twitter, you'll find links to these stories and more on spacedog.radio.com.
Hey, folks can also go to taper.li and get my free online newspaper called Global Newsfeed about stories from all over the world. And some stories that I've been working on too. So you might even read something by Tom Hartman up there or something. So it's free. You can just subscribe there. And also my YouTube channel is called MTC TV Media, MTC for Mark Taylor-Canfield. If you go there, there are hundreds of videos that you can check out on issues like this and breaking news stories, as well as some music and some other fun things too.
Mark, thanks a lot. Again, we got to run, but appreciate all your input. We hope to catch you next orbit with more news from Under the Radar.
Thanks. Peace out, Space Dogs.
Do you have any questions or comments about this? If so, I would like to hear from you. Email me at spacedog@spacedogradio.com. Visit our website at spacedogradio.com. And as always, you can follow us on Twitter at SpaceDogRadio. This has been the Space Dog Radio Show. I'm the Space Dog. Thank you for listening. Be safe, be happy, and I'll catch you next orbit.